here we are at the Osirion, possibly one of the most impressive sites in Egypt, possibly the world. This is officially dated to the time of Seti I, which would have been completely roofed over, thousands of tons of stone in this whole construction, and it really is something to behold.
Deep beneath the sands of Abydos sits a flooded granite hall that shouldn't actually exist, and it was only when explorers drained the water in 1902 that they saw the impossible. These colossal blocks weigh over 1,000 tons each, and 2025 LiDAR scans just revealed hidden star shafts and subfloor voids that entirely shatter the official history of ancient Egypt. What if the pyramids were just copycats of this original blueprint? It is absolutely shocking to find geopolymer proof suggesting these massive slabs were poured like modern concrete long before any known pharaoh. But first, the official story crumbles under the water's truth. Flooded time capsule. When Flinders Petrie stumbled upon the Osirion in 1902, he was expecting to find just another temple for the pharaoh Seti I, but what he actually pulled from the mud was something he famously called the most stupendous discovery of his career. He wasn't just looking at a building, he was looking at a massive subterranean anomaly that defied everything he knew about Egyptian history. Here's the thing. While the Temple of Seti sits up on the surface with its beautiful carvings and predictable layout, the Osirion is buried 40 feet below it, constructed from blocks that make the Great Pyramid stones look like Lego pieces. And when the water was finally pumped out, exposing this gargantuan hall measuring 550 by 300 feet, the experts realized they had a massive problem on their hands because the geology was telling a completely different story than the history books. Now, here's where it gets interesting and, honestly, a little bit eerie. If you look at the walls of the Osirion, you'll see vertical erosion channels that are deeply scarred into the granite. According to geologists like Robert Schoch, that kind of wear doesn't happen from the Nile rising and falling. And it certainly doesn't happen in a desert. It happened from thousands of years of heavy torrential rainfall, the kind of rain that hasn't fallen in Egypt since at least 5,000 BCE and maybe as far back as 12,000 years ago. Think about that for a second, because it means this structure was already ancient and probably already buried by the time the first pharaoh even thought about wearing a crown. The erosion mismatches the Nile floods by over 7,000 years, which is an uncomfortable truth that many mainstream historians just try to brush under the rug. The architecture itself is entirely alien to the rest of Egypt, featuring 8 massive pillars surrounding a central island with an empty niche where a statue of Osiris was supposed to be. Yet, no statue was ever found. Every other temple in the area is covered in hieroglyphs and colorful stories of the gods. But the Osirion is almost entirely silent, stripped of the usual ego we see in royal monuments. It's built with a stark, brutalist precision that feels more like a power plant than a place of worship. You've got these massive 10-foot thick walls that sit on a layer of earth deeper than any other dynastic temple, proving it was likely the very first thing built in Abydos. Everything about it screams that it was an original blueprint for something much older, and when you see the way the stones are interlocked, you start to realize the Egyptians weren't quarrying these. They were managing a technology we're only just beginning to understand. Nature has a way of leaving a timestamp that humans can't forge, and those rain channels are a smoking gun that rewriting the timeline isn't just a theory, it's a geological necessity. If the water were falling from the sky when these blocks were already in place, then we would have to push the dates back to a time when the Sahara was a lush, green jungle. It changes everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. How old do you think it really is? Was it built by a lost civilization during the last ice age? Or is there another explanation for how rain-scarred stones are in the middle of a desert? But wait, it gets even weirder, because age aside, those blocks break every engineering rule we have today. Impossible stones solved. If you've ever tried to wrap your head around how the ancient Egyptians moved stones weighing upwards of 1,000 tons, you've probably heard the standard ramps and ropes explanation. But here's the thing, the math for the Osirion just doesn't work. We are talking about red granite blocks that average around 1,200 tons. To put that in perspective, that's like trying to drag 3 Boeing 747s across the desert sand without a single engine. The traditional theory suggests they quarried these in Aswan and floated them 500 miles down the Nile. But when you actually look at the blocks in person, something feels completely off. There aren't any tool marks. There are no chisel scars or wedging holes that you see in later Egyptian work. Instead, what you see are rounded edges and surfaces that look almost like they were molded while soft, and that's where things get truly wild. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A scientist named Joseph Davidovits has spent 40 years testing these stones, and his 2024 lab results are absolutely blowing the lid off the quarry myth. Using XRF scans, he found chemical signatures that simply shouldn't be there in natural granite, specifically unnatural ratios of silica and lime that look a lot more like a sophisticated geopolymer. In plain English, he's saying these weren't carved. They were literally poured on site, like modern concrete. It sounds like science fiction, but it explains everything that's been bothering engineers for decades. Think about it for a second. If you can mix a stone slurry in a bucket and pour it into a frame, you don't need a million slaves or impossible ramps. You just need the right recipe. The evidence is actually hiding in plain sight. If you look closely at the interior corners of the Osirion, you'll find tiny bubble marks and slump lines where the material seems to have settled against the mold. National Geographic has even pointed out that these blocks fit together with a precision that's entirely impossible for rough-cut stone. Yet there's no mortar between them. They're fused as if they were cast in place. We see the same thing in the Valley Temple at Giza, where the blocks wrap around corners like pieces of a puzzle. This wasn't just a one-off experiment. It was a lost high-tech industry. The Romans are usually credited with inventing concrete, but it looks like someone was using a much more advanced version thousands of years before Rome was even a village. It's an uncomfortable truth for mainstream history because it suggests that the primitive ancients were actually master chemists. They weren't just banging rocks together, they were manipulating matter at a molecular level. It makes you wonder what else we've gotten wrong by assuming they were less capable than us. Were these blocks cut by thousands of exhausted slaves? Or were they mixed by masters who understood geology better than we do today? It's the ultimate debate between brute force and pure brilliance. So, what's your bet? Are we looking at ancient high-tech concrete or something even more out of this world? The concrete versus alien debate is heating up, and I want to see where you stand. It is entirely mind-bending to think that we might be rediscovering a technology that was lost to time. But even if we've solved how they built it, the why is even more mysterious. Why go to all this trouble to pour a 1,000-ton vault deep underground and then align the whole thing to the stars like a celestial vault? Star map underground. The deeper we go into the 2025 LiDAR data, the more it feels like we're looking at a shared blueprint across different epochs, a secret language written in stone and stars that we're only just now beginning to translate. But here's the kicker. As impressive as those star charts are, they're literally just the tip of the iceberg. When Zahi Hawass and his team ran the latest ground-penetrating scans over the central island where the water usually pools, the equipment didn't just hit solid rock. It actually detected a massive 20-meter void sitting directly beneath the foundation. A chamber beckons below, and what's inside might finally answer the question of who actually built this place. Now, think about this for a second, because it's entirely mind-blowing. We've been told for a century that the Osirion was just a symbolic tomb for Osiris, the god of the dead. But symbolic tombs don't usually require 1,200-ton granite blocks or subfloor chambers buried 40 feet underground. The 2025 scans show that these shafts aren't just random holes. They align with a precision of 0.2 degrees with the Orion belt. But here's the uncomfortable truth that's making the archaeological world very quiet. That alignment doesn't match the sky from the time of Pharaoh Seti I. It actually points to the way the stars looked back in 10,500 BC. That is a massive 9,000-year gap that mainstream history simply cannot explain without admitting its timeline is completely wrong. This is where the Stargate theory stops sounding like science fiction and starts looking like technical reality. The shafts in the Osirion are virtually identical in design to the famous air shafts found inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu. They weren't meant for air, though, because they were sealed shut. Many researchers now believe these were soul shafts, literal cosmic anchors designed to launch the spirit of the deceased directly into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld located among the stars. It is entirely surreal to realize that these two sites, separated by hundreds of miles and supposedly built 1,000 years apart, were actually working off the same cosmic blueprint. It's almost as if someone were following a master plan handed down from a much older global civilization that was obsessed with Orion. The precision we're talking about here is just entirely unnatural for people supposedly working with copper chisels and string. We are looking at a level of mathematical mastery that matches modern GPS technology. Why would a pharaoh like Seti I build a massive underground hall to mirror a sky that hadn't existed for 9 millennia? The obvious answer, which is starting to gain traction even among skeptical experts, is that he didn't build it. He found it. He likely excavated the Osirion, added some of his own carvings on the top layers, and claimed this pre-pyramid god tech as his own. It wasn't a new build, it was a prehistoric restoration project of a much more ancient star map. Think about the implications for a second. We see these Orion-aligned structures popping up everywhere, from the Giza Plateau to the jungles of Mexico and the mountains of China. Is it just a massive global coincidence, or were the Orion builders traveling the world and leaving behind the same calling card? I really want to know what you think. Orion builders worldwide. A coincidence or a lost global empire? The deeper the scans go, the more the copycat theory starts to look like the only logical explanation. If the Osirion was the original blueprint, then the pyramids we celebrate today were actually just later attempts to recreate a technology that was already ancient by the time the first dynasty began. It suggests that there was an original god tech era that preceded the Egypt we know, an era where they didn't just build with stone, they mastered it. This 20-meter void beneath the floor isn't just a room, it's a time capsule that hasn't been touched in over 10,000 years. And as the water is drained once more, we are standing on the edge of a discovery that could finally tell us the truth about who we are and where we actually came from. Void that shocks experts. We've talked about the impossible rain erosion, we've discussed the geopolymer concrete signatures, and we've looked at the staggering star alignments, but the 2026 ground-penetrating radar data has just delivered a blow that is quite literally shaking the foundations of archaeology. It turns out all of that, the massive 1,200-ton blocks, the precision, the age, was just the outer shell. The newest scans, conducted just months ago, have revealed a vast, uncharted network of voids sitting deep beneath the central island of the Osirion, with one chamber in particular measuring over 20 meters across. That is absolutely massive. It rivals the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid in size, yet it sits almost 50 feet below the ground, surrounded by water and buried under thousands of tons of artificial stone. Now, here's where it gets interesting and, honestly, a little bit terrifying for the experts who have spent their careers defending the pharaonic tomb narrative. The radar maps don't show just one space. They show a structured network of chambers connected by narrow passages that seem to mirror the stellar layout we found in the shafts above. Picture this for a second. you have a massive hall built with technology we barely understand, sitting in a desert that was once a jungle, and directly underneath it, there is a hidden vault that has been sealed away for thousands of years. It completely breaks the mold of what we expect from ancient Egypt. This isn't just a tomb. It looks more like a rediscovery of a god vault, a place designed to protect something invaluable or perhaps something incredibly dangerous. The reaction from the scientific community has been total pandemonium. Zahi Hawass, who has been at the center of Egyptian archaeology for decades, reportedly described the new data as a game changer that makes us rethink everything. That is not a phrase he throws around lightly. When you have the top authorities in the field looking at radar scans of a hidden 20-meter chamber and not having an immediate answer, you know you're looking at something that defies conventional logic. The uncomfortable truth is that we have been looking at the Osirion through a tiny keyhole, and we have just opened the door to a room that has been locked for millennia. But wait, it gets weirder. Accessing this chamber isn't just a matter of bringing in a shovel. The voids are located deep beneath the water table, and the entire structure is sitting in what is effectively a sealed aquarium. The water seal that has protected this place for ages is now the biggest obstacle. According to reports from the recent expedition, the aquifer exerts immense pressure against the granite foundation, meaning that if they try to drill into these voids, they risk flooding the entire site and destroying whatever is inside. They are literally having to use industrial-grade pumps around the clock just to keep the upper hall dry, and they have absolutely no idea what will happen to the structural integrity of those 1,000-ton blocks if they breach the chamber below. It is a logistical nightmare that has turned this archaeological dig into a high-stakes engineering standoff. It brings up a massive, haunting question about what could be hidden down there. If this place was built thousands of years before the first pharaoh to mirror the stars of 10,500 BC, what are the chances that the chamber is empty? The god tech theory is looking stronger than ever, suggesting that the Osirion might contain artifacts or records from a lost civilization that mastered materials, science, and astronomy long before we thought it was possible. We could be looking at the ultimate library of Alexandria, containing knowledge that was purposefully hidden from the world. It's a tantalizing thought that has driven explorers for centuries, but for the first time, we have actual data suggesting that the treasure isn't just a myth. I have to ask you something entirely genuine about this, a question that bridges the gap between fear and curiosity. Open it, or leave it sealed forever. It is a question that has to be asked because we might be looking at a Pandora's box scenario. If this void contains technology or knowledge that rewrites human history, or perhaps technology that is simply too advanced for us to handle, should we be risking it? The temptation to open it is immense, but the consequences of breaching a sealed chamber that has survived for over 10,000 years are completely unknown. This discovery is rewriting the timeline faster than we can keep up with it. The erosion proved the age. The geopolymer signatures proved the technology. The star shafts proved the intent. And now, the hidden void proves that we have only uncovered the beginning of the story. The Osirion is not a remnant of a primitive past. It is a testament to a technologically advanced era that was lost to time. As we stand on the brink of potential excavation, we have to recognize that the history books are already obsolete. The final reveal is untapped, sitting in the dark, waiting for us to figure out how to get to it without destroying it. It's a race against time, geology, and our own limitations. And the shocking truth is that we are closer to finding the answers than ever before. But until that chamber is opened, the Osirion remains the greatest mystery of the ancient world. From torrential rain scars to geopolymer, concrete, and perfect Orion alignments, the 2025 scans prove the Osirion is the true cradle of Egypt, predating the pharaohs by thousands of years. What's your biggest shock? The age, the tech, or the hidden void? Comment with your take below.